Here it is again. Hello, this is Bwana from Bwana.tv, and I got a juicy one. I got a juicy video to talk about. This one has to do with the company Turbine Incorporated and their statements regarding MMO development on an Xbox 360 versus on a PS3. So Turbine said, and I quote, that it's easier to develop massively multiplayer online games, they call them MMOs for short, or massively multiplayer online role-playing games. It's easier to develop these on the Xbox 360 than on the PS3. Now I gotta, before I even get to the juicy parts of why they said this, Turbine has an interesting history. They developed titles such as Asheron's Call, Asheron's Call 2, which I think Asheron's Call was actually my first MMO. Then I went to Asheron's Call 2, which died. They did Dungeons and Dragons Online, which was published by Atari. They also did Lord of the Rings Online. So they got a good history, but I don't know. That Asheron's Call thing, that was a really close tie-in with Microsoft because it was published by Microsoft. So there is a little bit of bias in here. I gotta admit, there probably is a little bit of bias in here. But they did list some good reasons, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. I'm just going to talk through the reasons they gave. I'm not going to go outside of that. The first reason they said that, well, the way they position is that you should not develop the game on the 360 first because things are harder on the PS3, and it's harder to port from 360 to PS3 than it is from PS3 to 360. So that's how they position this whole thing. That's the backstory. That's the context. I don't want to get any kind of fragmented arguments here. So the logic, they say, is that it's very tempting to make the 360 your lead SKU, meaning that you'll start with the 360. But they say that the Blu-ray drive is not as performing as the DVD drive when it comes to seek and access time. That's actually a true statement. When it comes to seek and access time to data on a Blu-ray drive, it's actually quicker on the DVD drive. That's been proven. That's a fact. I don't see how that's an issue with this game, with an MMORPG, because with just about every MMO that's been installed that I know of on a console, you have to install a majority of the data on a hard drive anyway. So seek time on the disc only comes into play when you're installing. Essentially, you'll have longer install times on a Blu-ray drive than on a DVD, theoretically. But on a DVD, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 discs. So, I don't know, there may be a trade-off. But when it comes to playing the game, it's not going to make a difference. Unless they're planning to run the entire game off of a disc before an MMO, that's kind of crazy. But, we'll continue. The memory architecture is different. They said that with the 360 you have 200, I mean with the PS3 you have 256-ish megabytes to work with, and with the Xbox 360 you have 512 to work with. This is a fact as well. That's true. Some developers prefer to have more memory to work with. It makes their job easier to do a lot of tasks. But as you can see with the games on both platforms, there are ways to get that 256 to look just as good and play just as good as the 512. It may not be as obvious. So I kind of agree with them there. The memory limitation may make things harder. So if you can get the memory to work on the PS3 with less memory, when you port to the 360, it should be a no-brainer. So it makes sense. In the context of what they're saying, it all makes sense. The third reason is that they say the PS3 tools aren't as friendly as the Xbox 360 tools. That includes performance monitors, debuggers, and the like. I don't know. I mean, this is all hearsay to me. I've heard more than one developer say that in terms of what tools Microsoft provides. And on the PS3 side, I haven't heard anything to kind of disprove that. The only thing I've heard is that several companies like Naughty Dog and other established people like Insomniac have really matured and developed their own framework. And they use that framework and that tool set that they've developed to build games quickly. Now, that kind of agrees with what he's saying here, that the tools that are provided to the PS3, not necessarily tools you build, but tools that are provided, aren't as friendly as the 360. A lot of Windows developers out there, they're probably right. I'm going to lean towards right here. So the tool set may be easier on the 360. I'll agree. They said migrating a product from the 360 to the PS3 is much harder than moving from the PS3 to the 360. That I don't know, but that's their logic. That's what they're saying. That's their statement. So overall, I don't know. I think it becomes a matter of investment. Companies like Naughty Dog and Insomniac invested a great deal of time in building a reusable framework, which, me being in the software development field, is a very smart thing to do. I've consulted on a lot of the software development projects. When you build a framework, custom framework, even established frameworks, just going with a framework is a great idea. Microsoft provides a lot of this, so in essence it makes it easier. But I don't know if their whole entire argument stands true. Because I'll say this in a couple different ways. Sony, their platforms are more expensive to develop for, and they're more difficult to get started on. Given that I believe that this is Turbine's first project on the PS3, I think this is kind of a lessons learned slide. That's something they learned on their first project. After this project and after the next project, I don't think this will be the case anymore. I think as time progresses, as we've seen with a lot of PS3 development shops, that argument of harder on the PS3 than the 360 kind of gets a little gray. They go, okay, on the PS3 you just have to do things different. Just look at Infinity Ward. I mean, they've ported Call of Duty 4 on both platforms very well. And the first revisions of Call of Duty weren't as tuned, but when we got to Call of Duty 4, they were, pretty much on par. So as time progresses, I think Turbine will definitely make strides, and they'll get better at this. And it's kind of cool to see that they're invested. I think I read today that they invested $20-some-odd million in investing MMOs on consoles. So there's a big shift. I guess they don't want to compete with the mighty juggernaut World of Warcraft. Alright, this is Bwana from Bwana.tv. I've talked about it long enough. This is Turbine's statement. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a console war in the comments. There always is when I talk about both the PS3 and the 360. So you guys have fun in there. I'll be watching. No, anyway, take care.